Basil is a very interesting guy, with a massive presence within the Omori community. It makes sense. He's arguably one of the most important characters in Omori, and one of the most
what the hell is even that?
headcanon characters within the whole game. But did you know, our bouncing baby boy Basil was originally not Basil at all? First, some background information. Omocat had big plans for Omori, and had many great minds working on it, the biggest name of which is Toby Fox, who you might recognize from Undertale. The development of Omori was very shaky, especially the funding for it. For those of you who are unaware, Omori had a massive controversy with the Kickstarter, but that is a whole other video entirely. You can see just from the trailers themselves, the game originally had a completely different narrative, but the same main idea. So naturally, with all the stages of development, characters are going to go through look changes and personality changes. However, the one who changed the most was our dear boy Basil. Oh shoot, wrong one! That's better. Our dear boy Basil. Basil as we know it was originally supposed to be called Flower.
Actually, before Basil was Basil, Basil was a character named Flower.
He appeared numerous times within the 2013 Omori story comics. He appeared here, and he appeared right here. He was originally supposed to be timid, frail, gentle, and a perfectionist.
This is Flower. And Flower was gentle and nice and timid and boring. Flower was boring.
Basil, or Flower if you will, was originally supposed to be almost a carbon copy of Mari's personality. But the whole perfectionist thing worked out better for Mari, so it ended up being scrapped, making his character kind of
Boring.
in Omocat's own words.
Flower's personality was a lot like Mari's before Mari was Mari. So he was kind of a perfectionist. He was really hard on himself and wanted everything to be perfect. But the perfectionist part of him worked better on Mari. So after we got rid of that part, he just became boring.
During the beginning of the production for Omori, Basil was being called Rowan. There was actually some art made of Rowan. Rowan was actually supposed to have an angry demeanor, a complete opposite of what Basil is now. Despite all the numerous character changes, Omocat decided to just mix Flower's and Rowan's personality, and somehow ended up with Basil.
And so here is Rowan, this angry boy. And there are some pictures of Basil here, but you can see he is very angry in all of them. So this was Basil's second evolution. And he was an angry, sad boy. And he hated you for leaving him. And he was really hard to write for, because all of his scenes came out really bad. They were horrible.
In an interview done with Omocat, she mentions how all of Omori's characters had their own complexities and quirks, but Basil was the most complicated and thus the most fun to write for.
There's the gentle and compassionate Basil. He's a sixth ranger type of character whose absence makes the heart grow fonder. Basil has changed the most since the beginning. At first, he was a sweet boy named Flower, who was well put together like Mari. And then he became a very angsty boy named Rowan, kind of like Aubrey. In the end, Basil took from both Flower's and Rowan's personalities and became his own interesting character. Basil is deeply caring and thoughtful, especially when it comes to his friends. But his loneliness and insecurity makes him dependent on others, sometimes dangerously so. He feels very deep emotions for those he cares about. And because of this, they can sometimes put him in a situation where he will unintentionally hurt others and himself. All the characters have their own complexities, but Basil is probably the most complicated character and ended up being the most fun to write for.
It is interesting to know how Omocat regards Basil. To Omocat, he's a character whose absence makes the heart grow fonder, and a character whose insecurities make him latch onto people. This is getting too relatable.
We do not care.
Another quick little fun fact is that Basil's interest in plants and photography is based on Omocat's own personal life and experiences with those hobbies. But moving back to the game's development, Basil was originally meant to be playable. Mind blown. He was supposed to be playable toward the end of the neutral route, and this never ended up coming to fruition because of the game's times constraints. Yet again, more Kickstarter drama. In a statement Omocat made on Twitter, she says, "On the other hand, even though including Basil as a playable character at the end of the neutral route was important, we didn't have the resources to test this feature thoroughly, and most people would likely be playing the true route anyway. So instead, that content was added as an update later on." And actually, another very important factor to consider is the enjoyment that is gained from each decision. If I enjoy working on something, I am able to put more energy into it and work faster with a clearer sense of direction as a result. It's the same when working with the team too. When we all liked the concept, it was fun to work on it together, and it really boosted team morale. And as much as I could, I asked people to work on tasks that I thought they would enjoy, and the work would come out better and faster because of it. It's more fun to work if the work is fun. That's besides the point though. Although now he is playable in Boss Rush, as we can see here. Okay, so we went over all of Basil's previous name, but how did Basil get his name now? Well, this is more well known, but it is thought that Basil's name is a reference to the character in the book The Pictures of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Dorian Gray is the subject of a portrait by Basil Howard, an artist whose deep infatuation with Dorian is almost romantic-like. You can see some very clear parallels between Basil Howard and Basil Omori. Basil Howard has a very clear infatuation with this painting, so infatuated to the point where it can be misconstrued as a romantic, while Basil Omori, spoilers ahead by the way, Basil Omori has an infatuation with Mari's hanging corpse. There's some very, very clear parallels. Basil in Dorian Gray cannot stop thinking about this painting, and Basil in Omori can't stop thinking about Mari's eye peeking through after she got hung by the tree. And that is how Basil came to be. One of the most complex characters in Omori, and the most complex character when it comes to behind the scenes development, and the most complex character when it comes to personality and thought process too. A very, very well written character. Omocat should be proud. Peace.